A pair of San Francisco 49ers will be highlighted on Netflix. The program receiver starting Wednesday. What about the over-unders for those 49ers receivers in 2024? Who's going to go off? We'll tell you on today's episode of Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our special Wednesday guest joining us momentarily. I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. And now, let's bring on today's guest.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
Wow. Can't believe it.
Wink, what's happening, man? We're only a couple of weeks away from training camp getting going. It kind of surprised me. It startled me as we talked about this off the air before we went on here. 2 weeks from today, we've got rookies and veterans all in training camp and doing things in workouts. So we'll see if Brandon Aiyuk is there. We're not going to go too heavy on the Brandon Aiyuk stuff. We've gone on a lot of that, but I want to talk receivers because the program receiver on Netflix starts Wednesday. And I'm sure they did it on purpose because they knew it was a Winky Wednesday. Wink, how excited are you to watch receiver starring not one, but two 49ers pass catchers in Deebo Samuel and George Kittle?
Well, I mean, the fact that the only tight end on there is George Kittle and he's a 49er says a lot about George Kittle's pass catching abilities and just his how just great he is on camera, how fun he is to listen to him talk. Anytime he's mic'd up, I'm listening to that audio. I'm watching those video clips. Like, he is a very captivating man. And so I'm really excited to get like some behind the scenes stuff and just really dive more into both Kittle and, of course, I mean, Deebo Samuel. Come on, it's fantastic, right?
How do you guys feel about there being two 49ers pass catchers on there? I saw a lot of fans from opposing teams kind of disgruntled. Like, why would there be multiple 49er players? Like, there should only be one, and that should be somebody else. Not knowing that.
Haters.
I mean, how many people turned it down? You know, how many people were willing to have cameras following them around, cameras, you know, all in their faces, whether you win, you lose, you know, having to talk to them, having to follow your family around and get really personal, you know? So, I mean, that's part of it, but how do y'all feel about seeing two 49er players on there?
Love it. It's fantastic for us, right?
Well, okay. We love it, right? But let's not forget, guys, when we watch receiver, that final episode is going to break our hearts again, guys, because they follow them through the season and through the postseason. So let's not forget that, 49er fans. When you're watching receiver, if you skip that last episode, we won't hold it against you.
I might skip it. Fun fact, I still have not watched the 49ers Ravens Super Bowl on repeat. I have not seen that back. I have not seen 2019. Haven't seen that. And I have not rewatched the past Super Bowl. And I'm holding out until the 49ers win the Super Bowl. I was hoping that they would win this past one, not so that it's like, oh, quest for 6 is done, like 49ers win the Super Bowl. It's like, nah, I get to go back and kind of appreciate a lot of the greats that played in that 2012 game. And I just can't. I can't go and watch it. I feel some type of way. I've walked into places and wanting to kick and punch every TV when they've had a replay of the Super Bowl games on. But hopefully this is the year. Hopefully the quest for 6 actually gets quested and the 49ers win, so I can go back and appreciate some of the greatness in those that 2012 Super Bowl specifically. The other ones, cool, whatever. But 2012, a lot of really good players I grew up watching. So
that quest needs to become a conquest and be done with, right? Conquered by the 49ers. Then it'll be a quest for 7, I guess, starts up after that. But you guys are crazy, man. The Super Bowls are like a warm blanket. I'm watching them all the time. I got the 2019 Super Bowl on right here in the background. I'm watching it right now. I'll give you a detailed breakdown of every snap of these things. No, I watch them when they come on. I think you got to learn from it. I know there's a lot of fans, and welcome back to those of you. Some just this last week, there was one listener who was like, I just finally could come back and listen to the podcast. Like that's 6
I
months,
get it.
half of the year. You couldn't even listen to a single podcast about your team that you love because the Super Bowl loss hurts that much. And so I totally feel it. And you guys aren't alone in that. And welcome back to those fans that weren't able to listen to podcasts immediately following the Super Bowl. Usually the giraffe does a lot of healing and you get excited because you want to hear about the new team and the new guys.
But
I know that we have to be,
right?
We have to kind of remove our emotions and, and talk from more of a professional perspective on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really hard going on live a few minutes after the Super Bowl. Like that hurt. That hurt. Like that was, I'm pretty sure if I go back, they can see it on my face, but that was a tough one. That might be the toughest podcast that we've had to record. Even tougher than like the 22 playoff loss to the Rams. But like this one was just, I was like dejected. Like that was tough.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have to be professional, but I'm voice of the fan here. So I come on here, I could throw down the passion. I can throw down the sadness and the happiness and that. And you guys got to keep it, on a certain level, whereas I can just go as high as I want. So, Croc, I fully agree with you. I can't watch those losses, man. I just can't do it. I haven't watched the NFC Championship game from 2 years ago. Like, I just can't bring myself to watch those kind of heartbreaks. And what's funny is there was a tweet the other day where a guy said he went into Costco. I wish I knew who it was. And then all the TVs had the Super Bowl on from last year. He's like, I walked by and I turned off every one of those TVs. I was like, well done. I would have done the same thing. 100%.
There we go.
Love that move. You know what's interesting though about receiver, and I think it's genius stroke. Deebo's more about action than talk, right? So I wonder how much he's going to talk. And obviously, George Kittle's a lot different. And if you're already following a team, you want George Kittle a part of the show. So I was probably adding him on there. But I wonder if they might have tried to get Travis Kelce and he said no. So then they went to George Kittle because Kelce is actually a receiver, not a tight end. But the fact that because they might have just wanted a guy who only catch passes and doesn't block. So I wonder if they went for Travis Kelce first and he couldn't do it because he's on tour in Japan or something right now with his lady. And so they went with George Kittle, knowing that he was going to bring the thunder. And I wonder how much the Super Bowl is going to play into it, because the most interesting thing about the show, if it's anything like Quarterback, and for those of you that didn't watch Quarterback, it was awesome. And just you learn a lot about the human being and how they prepare and what type of player they are. And I came away from Quarterback being like, man, Kirk Cousins does everything he can to maximize who he is. And Marcus Mariota doesn't care all that much. And I was like, I would probably not sign Marcus Mariota after they followed him for a year. And I'm not surprised his career's gone the way his has. And Kirk Cousins' career has gone the way his has.
Yeah, I think it was easy to go and get a guy like George Kittle. I mean, super entertaining. My wife, she loves Kittle. She's like, man, just her favorite player, just because of how entertaining he is. So I'd assume that Kittle being on there had nothing to do with Kelce. But if I had to guess, Kelce probably turned it down because Kelce was on a reality show years ago. It was Catching Kelce, something along the lines of that. But he had like this. It was like a love dating type thing with Travis Kelce, like early in his career.
I missed that one.
Yeah, I missed it too, but yeah, my wife likes to talk about it. Where she's like, "Oh no, I watched him on that show. What's her name? Taylor could do better. Like he's a dog." I'm like, "Whoa, all right." But no, hey, back to the Kittle stuff. Like, I bet they showed up for Deebo Samuel, and they're like, a couple days in, they're like, "We got to get this Kittle guy. Like, I know it's called receiver, but this guy's so entertaining." I bet they added him later on, where they're like, he probably kept popping up, on the camera. You know how he does in the back of guys' interviews and stuff. He'll just pop on.
Yeah,
and he probably had his way into it.
Probably had so much footage, and they're like, "Hey, George, we want to, work out a deal for you to show some of this footage." He's like, "Nope, you got to pay me. You got to add me to the show, and I'm here for you."
In or not?
He's a guy. He's just the way that he responds, even like when talking to the media, he knows what to say, how to say it.
Yeah.
Sometimes he kind of gives an a-hole response back, but he does it in like this humorous way to where like nobody's really offended. He just understands how to talk to people, how to work the cameras. If they didn't go to him like first and it was like an accident, shame on them. They should have known better. Like that's the guy you want to get on camera. I am curious to see what Deebo looks like though, on there, because he is a little bit more action. He will get to talking. He's on Up in K Adams. I want to say every week I see him on there. So he talks a little bit, but even then it's almost like kind of surface level and like kind of shorter answers at times, not like a very personable, very in-depth person. So I'm hoping maybe this will allow us to get a little bit more into who Deebo Samuel is on the field and the family man as well with his young son.
Yeah, because that's the best part about it, right? Like you said, with Kirk Cousins, we got to see him off the field. I hated Patrick Mahomes until I watched receiver, and I'm like, all right, I kind of get it now. You know, that's all he cares about is winning and like being there for the team and doing whatever it takes. And like that's what you want your football players to be. And I look forward to seeing Deebo, you know, off the field, and of course Kittle. And let's be honest, when Kittle's done playing football, it's not the last we're going to see a Kittle. He's going to be like doing Sundays, you know, play-by-play, or he's going to be on some, you know, pre-NFL talk show or something. Kittle's going to be around for the rest of our football lives.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be a lot of George Kittle, and more of them starting Wednesday. And I'm sure it's going to be binge-worthy for a lot of 49ers fans, and we'll see how much of the Super Bowl. I'm gonna sit through it, though. I'm gonna watch the whole thing, and I can't wait for the insight on not only the 49ers, but all the other receivers that are involved. It's a riveting sports series following 2023 season of NFL receivers Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. All very driven human beings, too. So I think we're going to see a lot about what goes into being an NFL player from receiver. Can't wait to watch that. Speaking of receivers, we got some over-unders for receiving yards for Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk as well. What we expect from them in 2024. And what happened to the 1,200-yard running backs? We know where one of them is. Where did the rest of them go? Next. Today's episode of Lockdown 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. We're talking killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets or NFL tickets. I know a lot of you circled games that you want to go see during the NFL season after the schedule release. Go see your San Francisco 49ers. You can find NFL, MLB, NBA. You can find all the sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, all the tickets near you, up to 60% off savings as well with last-minute tickets. You can buy up to an hour after the event starts. Flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, the views from your seat, and I love that all-in pricing. No hidden fees at checkout when you toggle on the all-in pricing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, I'm looking at FanDuel Sportsbook, one of our fantastic sponsors, and they've got tons of prop bets and tons of ways to bet on the 49ers to win the Super Bowl and all of that, but they've got over-unders on receiving yards. And me and Croc talked about this a little bit yesterday off the air, Wink. I don't know if you've seen these yet, but at FanDuel, the over-under, and I don't see George Kittle's over-unders right now, but we can talk about him as well if you guys want. But Brandon Aiyuk, the over-under for receiving yards for Brandon Aiyuk in 2024 is 1,000.5 yards. And Deebo Samuel is 775.5 yards. So I'll start with you, Wink. It seems pretty easy to smash the overs on both of these, right? But 1,000, you think Brandon Aiyuk's going over 1,000 yards and Deebo Samuel's going over 775 receiving yards in 2024?
That seems like an easy yes to both of those. I mean, maybe the Ricky Pearsall thing really made, you know, the sports books think like, oh, this guy's going to get, 75 to 100 balls thrown his way. I just don't see that happening. I don't see them getting that far away from Aiyuk. Aiyuk had an amazing year last year. Deebo is always going to be the focal point of this offense as long as he's on the field. Those both seem very low.
Well, my opinion of it. Oh, let me make sure So
at
my
least
opinion,
with the Aiyuk one.
The Aiyuk one is actually tougher, in my opinion. Like I think Deebo is the one that's the no-brainer. Like lock that in, go with that. But here we go. Brandon Aiyuk last year, he had 75 receptions on 105 targets, 1,342 yards. Now we have to remember that he led the NFL in yards per reception. He even missed a game as well. So shoot, you add that other game, there's a chance he's a 1,450 yard, maybe 1,500 yard receiver, right? The year before, Brandon Aiyuk played every single game. He was actually targeted 9 times more, had 3 more receptions, and had far fewer yards. He had 1,015 yards on more targets. So if he heads into this season, unless he just has this another great yards per catch season, there is a scenario where he gets just as many targets, just as many catches, but gets far fewer yardage for whatever the reason is. So for him, I am a little bit more worried than I am with Deebo Samuel. I feel like Deebo, they're going to figure out ways to get his touches. If you told me at the end of the season he had 825 yards, that's not a crazy amount. That's not a special season from him, but that is something where I feel like he can kind of easily get that yardage for Aiyuk. I feel like it potentially can be a little bit more challenging if he doesn't have a great yards per catch. I mean, it was by far the most yards per catch that he's had in the season. Prior to almost having 18 yards per catch last year, he had 13, 14.8, and 12.5. So if he goes back to his normal kind of usage in the sense of yards per reception, you could see a big drop off from his numbers, and it'd be a little bit more challenging to get the yardage where his over-under is.
Yeah, to me, it's still an over for both of these, but I think there is some pretty easy questions, and there's a reason that they're not like sky high over-unders. And the first one is just injury. And we've seen Deebo miss a couple games, every year. It seems like Brandon Aiyuk's been pretty healthy for the most part. So it's more about target share for Brandon Aiyuk and that efficiency for yards per catch will, I'm sure, come down from what it was last year. Where will it end up? Will it dip a ton? That could really hurt his ability if he doesn't have a huge target share or more target share than before. But I feel pretty confident that Brandon Aiyuk, especially if they re-sign him, they're going to focus on getting him the ball, and he should have at least as much or more targets than he did last year in the offense. So I could see an argument for why both could go under, but I would definitely take the over on both of those. But you know what's interesting? If you thought that injury was the biggest aspect of it, and one of those guys misses time, you brought up Ricky Pearsall. How about this bet? Ricky Pearsall if you think Ricky Pearsall is going to do a lot as a rookie, the most regular season rookie receiving yards for 2024-2025 season, Ricky Pearsall is only 14th. He's 40-1 odds to lead all rookies in receiving. If one of those guys gets hurt, or say Aiyuk doesn't sign or suddenly gets traded, that's a sneaky bet for Ricky Pearsall, because all of a sudden his target share goes from, 20. I don't even know what to project he's going to get to 100 more, right? And so he could be a true featured part of the offense even if he's more of a backside receiver like Brandon Aiyuk has been. If one of those guys goes down, instantly he's in the starting lineup potentially. So that's a sneaky bet if you want to fade one of Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel.
You're talking about Deebo Samuel's health, and when you look at him trying to hit over this number of 775 yards, he's gotten over that in 3 out of the 5 years. The 2 years he didn't get it, he played 13 games in one of those seasons, and he played 7 in the other. And I want to say in one of the ones where he played 7, he actually played like the first snap of the game and then was out like the rest of the game or something like that. He got hurt very early on. So those are the 2 years he didn't get it. He played far fewer games. Obviously, Deebo Samuel, for whatever reason, his health is always kind of one of the first things that comes up, with the question with him, how healthy is he going to be entering the season? But you also got to remember last year with games that he missed, he also played in a game. So first of all, he went over this number, but there was one game he played in where he had 0 targets, 0 touches, because it was a game time decision. I don't think they planned on utilizing him a whole lot in the game. Did not touch the rock and still cleared 775 yards in the season. Another game he played and left at halftime, I think it was the Browns game. So dealt with some injuries. Let's see so it says he only played in 15 out of the 17 games, and 2 of those games he either left early or did not play at all. So I think Deebo Samuel, in my opinion, is a guy where if you are going to put a large sum of money on any of these guys over-unders, it would definitely be Deebo Samuel.
Wink froze again, so he's gone. We'll see if he jumps back in on this because I know he has some thoughts on Deebo, Aiyuk, and some stats on George Kittle too. And I do want to talk a little bit more about George Kittle and 1,200-yard running backs that have gone the way of the dodo, Croc. So next, let's talk running backs. Let's talk tight ends. Let's talk more George Kittle, who will be featured on receiver, and what he might do, and maybe set our own over and under since it's not on FanDuel right now for George Kittle in 2024. Next. All right. So I know Wink's got some stats. So let's wait on Wink to talk more about George Kittle. And let's bring this up, Croc. And this is something I saw you retweet earlier today. And I'm going to bring it on the screen for those folks watching on YouTube. There was 14 running backs that rushed for 20 or 1,200 yards plus in 2003, Croc. 14 of them, and just one, and it was Christian McCaffrey in 2023. Unbelievable. Like half the league had 1,000-yard backs. And the ones that didn't have 1,000-yard backs probably planned on having 1,000-yard backs, but they just got hurt or something like that, right? So,
half the season had 1,200-yard backs, which that's a big difference there. Yeah,
well, I mean, this doesn't even show the ones that had like 1,100 yards and 1,050 yards, right? And so here's the name. These are big time names too: Jamal Lewis, Amon Green, LaDainian Tomlinson. This is 2003 season. Deuce McAllister, Clinton Portis, Travis Henry, Ricky Williams, Priest Holmes, Sean Alexander, Stephen Davis, Curtis Martin, Fred Taylor, Edgerrin James, and Tiki Barber. All had 1,200 plus rushing yards in 2003. 20 years later, how different is the league? One guy did it. It was 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey.
So great comments. If you follow me on Twitter at Crocky209, and in the comments, some people had, their thoughts. And probably the biggest deciphering factor with this is they just don't have guys getting the amount of carries that these guys were getting in 2003. You see a lot more, multi-usage running backs in some of these offenses. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, we've talked about it a lot, where he's just like, he holds his finger up, holding up the finger one, his pointer finger, saying, I'm out for one play, then I'm coming back in. A lot of guys don't have that kind of pull in their offenses. But the funny thing with that graphic there is, and if you look at some of my comments, some guys are like, who's Stephen Davis? Who's Travis Henry? And I'm like, oh, man, you guys take me back to my high school years with some guys that, I remember playing with those guys on game day or on Madden, and, they're really good running backs. You're utilizing them. And now they're kind of forgotten, but guys that were so productive, in their careers back in those days.
Jamal Lewis, 2,000-yard back. Was that the year he had 2,000 yards?
I don't know if that was a year, but he
was right around that time.
Yeah.
He was on a Super Bowl winning Ravens team, right?
Is Larry Johnson on that graphic?
Larry Johnson? No, he wasn't on this one.
Okay. He had a 2,000-yard season. I mean, guys were getting carries.
I mean, there's some Hall of Famers on that list. LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the all-time greats. I mean, unbelievable. He kind of gets overlooked for how awesome he was. Edgerrin James. But when you look at that list, it's funny because Travis Henry or, Ricky Williams had, one of the wildest careers. But even Clinton Portis and Jamal Lewis, Stephen Davis, some of these guys, like Curtis Martin was the one who was like, every year you could count on it. You knew exactly he was going to have 1,200 yards exactly every year. Wasn't going to lead the league in rushing, but he was going to be awesome. He's going to have over 1,000 yards. But like Jamal Lewis, 2,000 yards and then kind of disappeared, right? So that's kind of the thing with running backs, and it was happening back then as well. Is it was you were at the top for a short time and then you went away, and that's kind of the secret and the key for running backs is how long can you stay at the top of your game in the NFL and stay healthy.
Well, that's what changed the game, right? I mean, that's why we only had one 1,200-yard rusher. Is probably they got away from that. They're like, you can't give the guy the ball 350 times a year. Like, he's going to break down. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to see, the 400 carries or the 350 or whatever it is. If you look at the carries, I don't think there's anyone over 300 last year. Like, I'm not even sure anybody's really that close when it comes to that, because that's just not the game. Croc, you mentioned that, you have tandems. You got two guys back there. I mean, look what they did in Miami. They're just constantly cycling guys in and out. Nobody's getting a ton of carries, so you're not going to get a ton of yards. It's just not going to happen.
I think also a big part of it is there's more incentives to throw the ball. The way that they're calling, I always say, man, the NFL, they hate defensive backs, but the way they call pass interference, the way they call illegal contact, the way they call defensive holding, the way you can't hit guys too hard. And if you do,
the quarterback can't touch the quarterback.
Can't touch the quarterback. So I think there's just way more incentive now to put the ball in the air more, which like the 49ers, and there's a few other teams, but Baltimore Ravens, they're kind of a little bit more of a throwback mentality as it pertains to how they're calling plays. The rest of the league is like, we're just going to throw the ball at 10 and see what happens. Oh, got a 60-yard pass interference play.
But with the Ravens too, they're constantly cycling running backs through too, right? Nobody's on the field for more than 3 or 4 plays in a row, and then it's next guy in, fresh legs. I get it. I get why they do it. It makes a lot of sense. But I want to get back real quick to the Aiyuk thing because I froze up while you guys are talking about that. I didn't get to throw in my 2 cents there. With Aiyuk, we're talking about his pass numbers. Those were pre-Brock Purdy numbers. I mean, you look at Brock Purdy and he's looking down the field for Aiyuk. He's not looking for checkdowns with Aiyuk. His air, yardage number is so high because he shoots for Aiyuk way down the field, which is why, and actually, Croc, I looked it up. Aiyuk dropped to number 2 at the end of the year. George Pickens jumped ahead of him for average yards per catch. Like he went to 18.1 or something like at the very last game of the season, which I think Aiyuk maybe sat out. I don't think he played that one.
And Pickens had a big game against it was like a divisional rivalry where
he and that's what pushed him
like 200 yards or something crazy
into number 1. Exactly. So I think for Aiyuk, I think those numbers are doable again as long as Brock Purdy stays healthy too, because he you see Brock Purdy, he's like, okay, not there. Oh, there's Aiyuk, and it just happens constantly. That's I feel like Ayuk's game's really gone to that next level ever since Brock Purdy took over as quarterback.
He led the league in efficiency on post routes, I believe it is. Brandon Aiyuk did. It's that aggressively intermediate throws too. It's not a lot of short throws to anybody, especially Brandon Aiyuk in that offense.
And since we're talking about average yards per catch too, Meeksman at Meeksman on X brought up a great point about George Kittle and how he was the only 1,000-yard tight end last year, and that he did it on only 65 catches, which is phenomenal. So that gives him an average of 15.7 yards per catch, which was number 1 by tight ends in the league, which is huge. The number 2 tight end, you guys will never guess who the number 2 tight end is per catch. I'll give you guys 10 guesses, and I bet neither one of you will get it. You want to just take any quick shots at it right now?
Yes.
Is it Chig Okonkwo?
That was a good guess. It's Noah Fant.
Oh, okay.
At 12.9 was his average. And he's like down at 41st for all receivers yards per catch, whereas Kittle was 12th for all receivers for yards per catch. Like, it's an impressive number. What George Kittle does, again, Ayuk's not there, then it's Kittle long, right? Like Brock Purdy does a lot for these guys.
That's the catch too. So he's adding more per catch than other tight ends are too.
Exactly right.
So I think we all feel pretty good about the over-unders for 1,000 yards. Aiyuk 775 for Deebo Samuel if they stay relatively healthy. Since there's no over-under for George Kittle, where would we place the over-under for George Kittle?
He had 1,002 yards last year. That was and that was it was a lower year for him, right? Does anybody have his stats up? I'd love to hear kind of the last 5 years for Kittle.
I don't have it up, but he's always in that 900,000 yard range, except for that one crazy huge season he had in what was that year 2 of his career?
Yeah. So I have his numbers up. He did have, so last year he averaged 15.7 yards per reception. That is the most, barely edging out 2018. I want to say his quarterbacks were maybe CJ Beathard and I think Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. So Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. So he averaged 15.6 yards per reception. All right, that's again slightly lower than the 15.7 he had last year. 88 receptions, 1,377 yards. So that was the big explosive year, breaking the record for most yards in the season for a tight end. The following year, 2019, obviously he had Jimmy G for the whole year. He had over 1,000 yards. And then the next year, he really was on pace to have a really big season, but he missed 8 games. So he missed 8 games. That's not even, did he finish all the other games? But he missed 8 games, only played in 8, and he had 634 yards. So, if you're doubling that, we're talking about over 1,200 yards. Then he had 900, 765, and then over 1,000 last year. So super productive right in. I think the bigger issue for him is, I guess you kind of know he's going to hover around 90 targets, But man, he just comes off. It's the offense. I don't want to complain too much. I've complained so much about the usage with Brandon Aiyuk, but they have all these guys that are so special. I'm like, why don't you get the ball in these special guys' hands more? I guess it makes more sense when you have Christian McCaffrey. But I mean, there was a time where I'm like, well, how is I feel like because of how good they are, Kittle, Deebo, Aiyuk, they should all get 8 targets per game. That's not to say they're going to get 8 catches, but they should get 8 targets each per game, because when they have the ball in their hands, especially Deebo, especially Kittle, when the ball is in their hands, special things happen. Special things, like they are special with the ball in their hands. We just talked about Kittle, by far the most yards per reception for tight end. When you look at over his career, his longest touchdowns, I mean, like 66 yards, 54 yards, 48, 44, 61, 85, 44. Like, that is a special guy with special ability. And I feel like just give them more opportunities, and the more opportunities you give them, the more opportunities they have to do special things. They need at least 8 targets. And that's the weird thing with the 49ers offense, because of how many good weapons there are. A guy can get a bunch of targets, and then you can look at this other guy like, wow, Aiyuk had 4 targets this game?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Deebo had 3 targets this game. It ends up looking a little weird, but the result has netted a positive in the sense of wins for the 49ers.
I mean Kyle Shanahan loves that. He loves balance. He wants to stay in front of the stick. He's going to run the ball. So, I don't know how we all believe that they could have more pass attempts in the offense, but I don't know how many more really realistically we can expect. And it's funny because I talk about balance, and at the end of the season, it's very balanced, but during the year, which receiver it is per week, you never know, because it'll be a big Aiyuk game, and it's a big Deebo game, then it's a big Kittle game. And it's funny because last year, if you look at the leading receiver in every game, Aiyuk did it 5 times, Kittle did it 5 times, Deebo did it 5 times. And then I think McCaffrey was 1, and Jennings was 1. So again,
that's what I was going to say.
Balanced at the end of the year, even though week to week, you never knew which guy it was going to be. It was like, oh, this is a Kittle game. This is an Aiyuk game. Oh, this is a Deebo game.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get the ball into the offensive player of the year's hands too, right? Not just between the tackles, not just on pitch outs, but you pass him the ball. All of a sudden, he's in space with the ball, and McCaffrey is so dangerous when it comes to that. So it's just, I have a big grin on my face, and I'm really giddy right now because I'm really excited for all these weapons yet again to start a whole new season and see how they distribute the ball, see who gets those targets, what they do when the ball is thrown their way. Like, it's a good time to be a 49er fan. I know they haven't won the big one, but every single game, they're going to bring it. And that's a good feeling.
That is the voice of the fan, Nicholas Winkler. You can find him on Twitter, X, whatever they call it these days, at Bay Area Wink. Me and Croc, you can find at BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Make sure you guys are all subscribed on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow. It's time to start previewing training camp. We're 2 weeks out, guys. Right here, Locked On 49ers.
See you.
Yeah! Subscribe to the video. I can't. I just can't.